Because there has not been a focus on telecommunications in the past, there needs to be some education that happens during that time. In the past, with these individual specific purpose-built networks, they didn't have the visibility within the utility for executives to even know that they necessarily had telecommunication networks. When you start talking about networks that are multi-use, whether it's PLTE or some other technology, there is a cost to them. You have to purchase spectrum to run them on. The infrastructure costs more, but you're running a network that is potentially providing the platform for, say, 5 to 20 previous networks that were all individual. Yeah. And so there's a higher visibility, but along with that, you need to educate your executives and you need to educate regulators, and that should be happening during that 5 to 10 years as well. Like, you don't want to wait until the year before you need to ask for a large amount of money to start educating the folks within your utilities that aren't familiar with that. You need to be thinking about that ahead of time and planning for that and educating them along the way, because it takes a while for people to change their mindset from not even knowing that these networks exist to being supportive of funding those networks and understanding the importance of what those telecommunications systems are providing to the utility.
Yeah. That's that, to your point, is like an ongoing process, and you want to do that ahead of time of when you start really diving into the next level of kind of the needs analysis.
Exactly.
We can capture that as either a stage before this or just a process in itself that is a part of this stage.
I would just call it telecommunications awareness and education.
I like that.
Because you're not going to jump right into, we're going to do PLTE, because then in my mind, if you do that, then you're like, we are providing a solution before we have talked about the problem. And I think that we need not the problem, but what the needs are. And I think it's important to look at it from what makes the most sense for this specific utility and not necessarily saying that it's PLTE up front. I think that needs to be part of the assessment, is looking at, is PLTE the right solution for this utility?
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Let's assume that there's been a ongoing effort in the past, just in an ideal situation where the executives and all of the key stakeholders are educated about just the different technology landscape and what are the different options. Where's the trend? What other utilities or companies are doing? So let's assume that's the case.
Yep.
And let's assume that, okay, we're in the annual business planning stage where, okay, there is an assessment to make and a decision to be made of whether or not to invest and build. So that's on the table. Defining the use case and the business requirements. You and I have been on a project in the past where we've went through this exercise and then did a cost-benefit analysis, right? So at a high level, does this make sense, kind of just the stages in the process?
Yep. So we define the use cases and the business requirements, and that's going to involve meeting with the stakeholders. So typically you don't want to do that in a vacuum. You don't want to do that just as the telecommunications department. You want to make sure you're bringing in all of your business stakeholders in the various divisions within the company and having conversations. In my mind, it's a lot of crystal balling. Like looking at here's what we're doing now. And it's also digging into as much detail as you can, like finding out what is the actual throughput of these networks that exist, which is sometimes hard to find of older networks because that information is not necessarily readily available. So it's digging into what is now, but then also looking at what do we see coming in like the next 20 years, which I think is really hard. And so a lot of that is going into, and also like relying on consultants and other people to help you look at what are those industry trends, what is coming down the pipeline, understanding what art of the possible might be. And 20 years is a long time in technology, right? So a lot of it is, what do we think we might be doing? And try to incorporate that in a realistic way, not just put everything in there, because no network is going to be able to do everything. but looking at realistically, what do we want our network to be doing within 20 years, and defining that and putting that into the basis of the planning is a very important, I don't want to say first step, but one of the most important of first steps.